The second patch for Baldur's Gate 3 is officially live just in time for launch on the PlayStation 5. In today's video, we're going to take a look at this gargantuan patch. It is definitely the largest one so far of the two, and see what they've got in store for us. Let's jump in. Well, they introduced it only a few days ago in a community update. It's Wither's wardrobe of wayward friends, and now they're bringing it into the game, allowing us to dismiss co-op party members and bring your companions back into the fold. With the solution only extends to custom tabs, however, so you can't throw Gale into the cupboard. And that's one of the headline changes that we'll look at in this video update. We'll look at the big highlighted changes first, and then I'll show you all of the rest, but I won't necessarily highlight every single fix and tweak. Alongside Wither's wardrobe being a highlight, they say there are plenty of performance improvements and UI tweaks. They've also added new epilogue scene for Karlach, and they're working on additional endgame scenes featuring other characters too, leaning into that, wanting to put a bit more into Act 3, addressing concerns around cut content and so on. Additional Karlach moments have also been added into Acts 1 and 2, allowing her to better reflect on her infernal engine and the options available to her. So let's take a look then at the highlight of the patch. Firstly, in terms of features, there are three big ones. There's Wither's wardrobe of wayward friends. As we discussed, you can now dismiss co-op party members, get them out of your campaign. There are performance optimizations across the board, and we'll look at those in a little bit of detail in just a moment. And then finally, they've reduced the size of save games, and as we'll find out, plenty of ways around doing that, including giving us an option to delete all but the most current save for any individual campaign. Karlach is a big feature of patch 2, and as such, some things have spoilers. If you'd like to skip the spoilers, there'll be time cards down below so that you can move between sections, but I will show them here. 4 points to note about Karlach. The patch brings an additional scene to conclude the ending, in which Karlach decides to travel. If Karlach's in your party at the end of the game and the Blade offers to go to the Hells with her, you can decide to go with them. Go alone with Karlach, or let them go by themselves. And then more broadly, as I say, they've added new moments for companion and avatar Karlach to reflect on the state of her internal engine between acts, and they've added a number of avatar Karlach moments to reflect on the possibility of her engine burning out after getting a second upgrade. So by and large, a little bit of love thrown into her story throughout, and I think that's a good thing to see. They wanted to highlight two blockers, two sort of crashes or blockers, things that get in the way of the game running in particular, and as we'll see later, there are plenty more where this came from. The first one I think is most important. It's happened to me many times. They've fixed the issue around potentially getting stuck in combat because a player character cannot be selected to end their turn. There's just kind of this character who the game thinks needs to do something, but you have no way to control whether they will or won't. They've fixed that, apparently. Thank goodness, because that's happened to me actually a few times. And then the second one that they highlight is that they've fixed an issue causing you to get stuck in dialogue with angry Marhya and Oyster Boy Dringo by the Sword Coast Couriers. That may mean something to you. That may not. And alongside performance, the user interface was also quite a big focus of this patch. Some of the key highlighted changes at the start include that they've added a delete all but latest option for each campaign, so you can regain a little storage space wiggle room. So all of those extra save files from the million times you saved before rolling that die, well, now you can delete them all with a click. They've also added new icons for equipped items. It's easier to tell if they're equipped by the selected character, one of your characters, or another player's. Including, as well by the way, or sort of leaning into items a bit further I should say, they've added item rarity filters to your inventory now as well. Just a nice little tweak and change there. I think we could probably see more changes along this line moving forward, but it's great to see that at the start anyway. The other highlighted changes for the user interface include the fact that your turn notification now lists which character's turn it actually is. The character summary on leveling up will now update to reflect changes in your ability scores. Nice to have that information up front. The active search list now persists after being opened and is more informative. And finally, Action Radial. The Radial now creates containers for spells created by other spells, making them easier to manage. And as we move through this, you'll see lots of changes sort of focused towards the console release, or for those of you who use controller on PC, more importantly, because of course we are gearing up for the PS5 release for Baldur's Gate 3 just a couple of days away now. Now, because this is such a big patch, they obviously can't highlight every change. And in this video, I'm not going to sit here and read out every single one either. What I will do though, is quickly introduce each broader section of changes, highlight a few things within it that I like, and put it on screen. So you can pause and read it just in case there's something specific that's been grinding your gears while you've been playing Baldur's Gate 3 and you want to check the patch notes for it. Because I know that everyone's case is slightly different. Crashes and blockers, the big one. And of course we talked about that main blocker around combat being fixed, which is great to see. They also note a variety of other ones, including an issue that blocked saving, when you finish the character creator, when generating loot that can't be picked up, when switching between controller and keyboard, or when assigning an action to a slot in that radial menu, as well as a crash, by the way, when loading a save game. That one, a lot of you could have seen. They move through to continue to talk, some of them about very quite sort of specific locations, specific areas in the game, putting a dead character in a container, by the way, and then yeeting that container into a chasm will no longer permanently destroy the character. They will now float around as a resurrectable soul echo as expected. Which one of you was who was doing this? They fixed an issue with picking up corpses with containers too, so there you go. Man, I love these Baldur's Gate 3 patch notes. They are stupendous. Performance and optimization. Probably another one that's quite important for us to look at the detail a bit more, especially for those of you who are moving through, say, into Act 3. They've improved performance and made optimizations, they say, across the game. And in their recent community update, they said, you know, in particular, we're looking at Act 3, but also we'll be making improvements across the board, including, of course, Acts 1 and 2. They've improved CPU load. They've made performance improvements related to controller movement and for when you're moving around the world with a controller. They've moved surface textures and decal creations and other things to worker threads, and overall more optimizations around reducing the files, the save game sizes, I should say, optimizing the controller map by removing some duplicate items. They've improved the performance of the mini-map, of all things, and made changes to make loading save games made in older patch versions significantly faster. These changes will continue to make loading old save games speedier in any patches and hotfixes that come, which is actually probably pretty important because for many of us, we will be carrying save files through patches, considering how fast these things are coming out. Now, the UI is a massive, massive, massive section of this update. To quickly highlight some features, the hotbar and the HUD saw some changes, largely fixes, but also making hotbar icons for the number of unlocked and available spell slots you have more intuitive. As far as the inventory, of course, we've discussed already that there are additional filters involved in the UI. They've also improved light source on the tooltips to clarify the purpose of the slot, remove duplicate close prompts when the equipment slot is open, things along that line. And then inside of combat, of course, the big fixes around keeping it rolling and keeping it moving. But they've also done a variety of things to make information display a bit better, fixing advantage and disadvantage indicators that sometimes showed up in the active role UI and dialogue, fix the combat log, not always showing attack damage rolls, turn order UI, health bar animations, missing character portraits, you name it. There's a whole lot of fixes to the UI in and around combat. Carrying on with the user interface, one big one that was really grinding my gears that I'm glad to see in here on the journal. Quest categories and entries in the journal will now remember whether you've expanded or collapsed them. Thank goodness. I don't know how many times I've collapsed that completed quests thing because it's overwhelmed me. Great to see. Furthermore, changes to trading, tooltips, saves, including that they've added the difficulty setting in the save game information. They've really reduced the size of them, given us options, of course, to delete them all. You can now save under your character's name, even if you're polymorphed as well. And in the third and final section around UI, they've organized the keybinds menu. They've reordered and reworked options menus to make them a bit more intuitive, a bit more user-friendly. As far as character creation and level up goes, you can skip the level up animation now, and they've fixed some class icons around level up UI and the level up banner, And then there's a few sort of miscellaneous things that you can see. Most of them are maybe unlikely to reach into your day-to-day Baldur's Gate 3ing, but nonetheless good to see them there. There are so many improvements focused around the controller, which will of course, as I've mentioned, be important to PlayStation players and maybe some of you playing on PC as well. There's a variety of new functionalities that have been added, as well as a huge number of fixes. They've added fast travel to the character radial menu, added shortcut prompts for jump and hide actions, added a short delay to stick input after selecting an action in the radial menus to avoid accidentally selecting something immediately after, limited the maximum number of radial members, and fixed a variety of other things. The shortcut menu and character selection options are now accessible from the action radial menu too. So overall, the controller has received a glow up. And honestly, these controller changes just go on and on and on. If I were to go through all of them, you and I would be sitting here for an hour today, going through every little thing that's changed with the controller. But as you can see, it really stretches across every area, from adjusting the margins and sizes of tooltips, making it more obvious if you're on low health at the start of your turn in combat, as well as tweaking the reactions UI in and around combat sees a variety of changes. And you can now rotate and zoom in and out of the character creation screen when you're choosing a name. That, among many other things that see controller hopefully be given more parity with keyboard and mouse. The multiplayer UI also features in this patch, although to be perfectly honest with you, for the most part, this section is just a variety of fixes, host error messages, enabling combat, secondary local players not having quest, location, secret map markers unlocked until saving or loading the game, that kind of thing. As far as gameplay goes, again, some stuff big, some stuff small, as we discussed. If you dismiss your companion to camp, shove them into a chasm, Withers will now be able to resurrect them. So you can shove them into a chasm again, probably. Clicking a party member's portrait on the map or minimap will now select the character and focus down on them. And then there's a huge number of fixes. In terms of combat and balance, might be a few challenges, changes, fixes, etc. that you're interested in here. They've fixed an issue with auras causing NPCs to make inefficient choices, like running toward you to shove you and then running away again. They've also fixed aggressive beasts so that they'll now enter combat instead of fleeing when attacked from afar. They've also made it so that certain spells don't take into account inherited conditions. That was an issue that has been fixed. They've updated also the grace period for joining a combat late to be at the end of the world item's turn in the first round. And sort of building on that a little bit more, a few other fixes around joining combat timing in here too. In terms of flow and scripting, a lot of fixes. Most of them, I doubt that you will have encountered issues around a bug that causes Astarion to be permanently knocked out by a certain event at camp. That's been fixed, kind of a funny one. Otherwise, it's sort of things like that in and around different scenes, not triggering, that kind of thing. As far as character creation and leveling up goes, as we've discussed, you can skip the leveling up animation. They've fixed characters in the creation screen sometimes getting obscured, and the controller has, of course, seen its glow-ups here too. They've added grid icons and button prompts on the character creation options that open up a grid selection when you're selecting things like colors if you're using a controller, and a few changes to split screen, character summary, and alignment. And the final three categories, we're going to group them together because they're quick and you want to get on and play some Baldur's Gate 3. Most of the things that you see here are just fixes. I guess the only thing that I really wanted to highlight was if you're playing on the Steam DECK, which I have not, but you may, settings now default to auto-rotate camera with speed set to max should help to feel a snappier experience, and a change around the defaulting to 16:9 resolution there as well. And that concludes this video, but I'd like to end on a question. If you've been playing on PC, which of course you have, because it hasn't been out on PS5 or any console yet, haha, noobs. I'm kidding. But my question is actually, do you play with controller or keyboard and mouse? Particularly, I'm interested if you play in controller. I assumed that basically no one did, and we were all using keyboard and mouse. And recently on some videos, I noticed a few comments suggesting otherwise. Let me know if you've been playing with controller, and if these changes are exciting to you. I'll see you next time.